Welcome to Widowed Too Soon, where real-life widows and widowers come together to share their stories of survival, faith, and the journey of finding hope in the darkest of times. Whether you're newly widowed or have been on this journey for some time, each week we're here to provide you with inspiration, practical advice, and the reassurance that you are not alone. You were made to not only survive, but thrive. And now here's your host, a woman who has walked this path herself, who finds solace in writing, joy in speaking, and freedom in dancing like nobody's watching. Michelle Bader Eversole.
Welcome to Widowed Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Eversole. I'm so excited to be back with another guest this week. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. I'm just meeting her right now with you guys, which is exciting. She reached out to me and I was like, this is somebody you guys need to hear from. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about her. So I've got Rachel Powell with me, and Rachel Powell is an inspirational writer, speaker, singer, and merchandise creator who is on a mission to reach people struggling with pain and hopelessness after losing her young husband by suicide and then attempting herself. A widowed and remarried suicide survivor, she is also a biokinship and stepmom, a registered nurse, and the founder of Hope Speaker. Her mission is to empower people to recover their lives, have hope for their future, and in some cases to simply keep surviving in the pain. Wow, that is quite an intro, Rachel. You have done some amazing things.
You earn some expertise through.
Right. We are so blessed to have you here. And this is a different kind of interview than we've done before. Your story is different. We've had a couple suicide widows and not a lot. So that's a great one for us to hear. Okay, the great is the wrong word. You know what I mean? I'm glad that you can relate to people that I can't relate to, is my point. That I'm glad that you're here, that you can relate. And it's like, you're making purpose from your pain, which is amazing, because some people just curl up in a ball and never do anything else. So I love that you have rose from the ashes and you're doing amazing things with your life. And you're what I call a widow influencer. That's what I call myself and other people. I know it's kind of funny, but I'm like, when I'm talking about people, I'm like, oh yeah, she's another widow influencer. But it's someone whose heart is to help widows, and you have more within that. And today we're also going to be talking about like what it was like to date again and to get remarried. So we have a lot to cover. So first of all, just thank you for being here. And we usually just start the story with, tell me about your life and, with your late husband, what it was like, and, and then kind of like when things changed and what that was like. And also, I don't even know this. Where are you coming from today? Where do you live? What area?
Yeah, so I'm in northern Colorado.
Okay.
Up near the mountains here. And this is where I was born and raised.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we just did a retreat in Guffey, Colorado.
Oh, did you?
So yeah, we flew into Denver and then drove for 3 hours out in the middle of nowhere, went to 8,000 feet in altitude. And it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. We rode horses, we did ATVs. And this was our second widow retreat, and it was amazing. So it's definitely beautiful country out there. So
yes,
anyways,
it's really nice. This is where I was born and raised. This is where I met my late husband, Andre. And so we went to high school youth group on a trip after we graduated high school, and we were married pretty young. We were both going to Colorado State University.
Okay.
As you mentioned, I went the path of nursing. I ended up going the path of nursing, and Andre went all the way through his PhD in civil engineering. He was an incredible person. We were married at 19.
Wow.
So very young.
Yeah.
And we ended up being married for 11 and a half years to the day.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we kind of grew up together,
Yeah.
That was what I knew. We kind of figured out who we were and put our lives together alongside one another. And so we raised, and I am still raising biologically my nieces and my nephew. And so he joined me in that. He was an incredible dad, the only dad figure that they had. His heart was just wide open. We ended up having one biological one, so there was 4
Wow.
kids, but a messy situation with a lot of trauma in their background and complications. We loved serving in our church, and we're involved in leadership in different realms. I did worship, and he was very hospitable. He's part of the hospitality team. We did
nice.
international student ministry. That was just our life, really, was living and breathing, trying to reach people with love and with the gospel. And things were, pretty darn good. My husband struggled with an addiction that had been present at the beginning of our marriage, and then there were years of sobriety, and then that kind of reared its ugly head again. And in the last year of his life, things completely spiraled out of control. In hindsight, there was clearly some mental health things going on. I believe he was undiagnosed depression, extremely angry, and that for men can present that way as anger. He just lost. I mean, he had finished his PhD and finally started his dream business, and he's like, I don't really want to do it. There was a purposelessness and struggles related to the addiction as it got out of control. I had to learn, really for the first time, how to have boundaries where I was told I couldn't. And part of the church that we were involved in, that was part of it, was like, submit to your husband, submit to your husband, submit to your husband. And you don't have grounds for anything. And so the last year was like this conglomeration of abuse and addiction and things getting really crazy, and me crying out for help to people who weren't listening and telling me to stay in it. And I was part of support groups and had my own counselor, and was really learning to draw lines to keep myself safe. And then I lost Andre by suicide in June of 2019. And it was like, it was just like the last thing in the world you would ever imagine would happen. Even though things were getting really dark and crazy and like schizophrenic, it was what you lived and breathed every day.
Yeah.
And who he really was, who he really is in the spirit, was nothing like that. Like, he was the most humble, teachable, people-loving, patient man. Like, he really became this other person. And so when that happened, it was right before the COVID pandemic. We went into that. I had these 4 kids. We were all completely broken. And the guilt that, suicide survivors, everyone can struggle with that. You're wondering, when was the last time that I saw them or talked to them? Could I have said or done something different? And everybody questions that. But when you're in the thick of it, being like the most intimate partner, and he really had a lot of anger directed specifically at me for my boundaries, and telling me that I was, a feminist and not submissive, and really attacking that, like shredding the book on boundaries from Henry Cloud that I was reading. And just really far out there, that the guilt thing escalates, like, because he felt that it was my fault. So when it happened, how much more would I feel that it was my responsibility and what I had done? So that was a huge piece, has been a huge piece of my healing journey as well. And the Lord has been so faithful. Like, that has been the main lesson and takeaway, is the faithfulness of the Lord. There's nothing else that has carried us through this darkness. And I have this life now living in the tension of both understanding the devastation of suicide from someone who has lost someone, where I know it doesn't solve any problems. It's not the answer. It causes more pain. I know all of those things. I'm a very strong suicide prevention advocate. I've done lots of work in that realm. And yet at the same time, living in the tension of, I also became so low in this time, and what I was wrestling through with, the church, how that continued to be an unsafe place, and the failures, was pulled out of worship and not allowed to go back. And my life was just under a microscope when I was grieving. And it was so terrible. My own sin and failure in my widowhood, it just felt like everything was so dark and so hard for so long, that I also understand the place of being where the pain feels unbearable and like you can't do it anymore. And I did end up attempting twice myself, and have struggled with suicide in the aftermath. And that's a really big part of the impact of suicide. It's almost like a door is opened. Like when someone really close who's done that, it's almost like it becomes an option and a possibility. And that's why, rates for people who have experienced suicide loss go up. But I don't know how seriously we take that people are really at higher risk in their pain and following people in the same way. And so that was part of my story, and the reason why, Hope Speaker came to be. The Lord gave me a clear vision. One of the times, it wasn't one of my attempts, but it was one of the times I was still very, very close, alone, laying outside on the rocks where my husband passed away. It was like 3 a.m. I had walked there barefoot, just like he had, and the Lord, I was ready to go, and the Lord gave me this vision, which is so, like, I know it was from the Lord. My mind was not even able to conceive of anything related to a future or to hopes or to dreams in any capacity. And he gave me this vision that I was standing on stage and I was speaking hope to people.
Wow.
And as I looked out, that I saw all of these people, in their own places, like I was, like ready to go home too. And he told me, you have to keep going. Wow. You have to keep living. You have to show them how. And it didn't end the struggle by any means, but it got me up that night, and I walked home. And later on, still years, that's the hard thing, the waiting down the road.
Yeah.
Hope Speaker was birthed to reach people who are struggling with pain and with hopelessness. So I have a strong heart, of course, for widows, for people who have either been impacted by suicide or who struggle with it themselves, and also for women who have been voiceless or powerless in their church and in their marriage. So that's kind of how all of that came to be.
That's a lot. Like you have a lot that God is using to help other people. And that just, I got chills when you told me that you got this vision of the people. And I'm reading this book called Created to Hear God, and it's talking about the different ways that people hear God. And one of them is seeing. I think I'm a seer too. And it sounds like you could be a seer, where it's like God gives you a picture. When I was thinking about quitting this podcast a few months ago, which means you wouldn't have been here, I got all of a sudden a picture of all these people with megaphones. And it was God saying to me, keep going, like you're going to give people a voice. And it's so powerful to see like how God can speak in pictures all of a sudden. And like he gave you this vision, like that's incredible. And not only is it incredible, but you're actually acting on it. Some people might be like, oh, I don't know, but you're doing it. You're out there doing all the things and helping people. And it's just one of the most beautiful things to watch God make beauty from ashes. That's like one of my favorite things. It's like, if we had to go through this pain, we can help other people. And you have so many avenues that you're helping people. Because there's like actually, two different things, but as you said, they're tied together. There's widowed by suicide. And then there's also people who have suicidal thoughts. And then sometimes those are together. And so you're able to help all of those people. So I want to talk a little bit more in detail about what it was like when so it was a shock when you became widowed. It wasn't like a long, I know there was mental health stuff, but not like something like I had like cancer, it's coming, all of that. So what was that like when, you found out? What was that like for your kids? Kind of take us back to the very beginning, it was like.
Yeah, I just, I truly, in the core of my being, believed that Andre would never do something like that. He had only mentioned suicide one time, a couple months before, in a marriage counseling session, where that was when he, reiterated about his business and the things in his life he didn't really feel purpose in them anymore or know why he was doing them. And he shared that, he just wanted to go home and be with the Lord. And, the marriage therapist paused, he was like, because we were talking about a suicide reference. And he said, do we need to make a safety plan? Do we need to put a safety plan in place? And Andre said, no, like I would never do that. I'm just really angry and hurt and struggling. And then it was kind of let go. And it just, like I wish anytime anyone has ever mentioned suicide or struggling with that, it would be taken so seriously, because sometimes you don't even get that. And sometimes that's all it is. And people who continue to struggle with it, and even those that talk about it, more routinely, like I've had to ask people for help in this area over the years, and it all needs to be taken so seriously. But in my mind, he had mentioned that, but again, Andre was like the life of the party person.
Right.
He was like the most joyful, positive, encouraging, people loving, it was just like, of all people, that's, and that's who it can happen to. Sometimes you're like that person of everybody. Like it wasn't, for him, wasn't the depressed person laying in bed and not able to get out. He was there and living, and then he wasn't. So it was a complete shock. Complete shock. And it was just completely devastating. There was so much to navigate, in the aftermath. It was a nightmare. Different people had different opinions about whether I should talk to my kids straightforward about that or not. And I'm glad that I moved forward with my convictions, and also after talking with some specialists with children, to, in an age appropriate way, tell them what had happened, so that I didn't hit them with that later, how they actually passed. So I felt that was important. But all of us and my kids, just shock and devastation. It was, I just could not imagine, how am I going to do this without you? I remember, for a couple of days, there was the first night I stayed with his parents, and the second night I was on my parents' property. And then I gathered up my kids and we all went home. And I remember that song. I played the song, You're Gonna Be Okay, by Bethel Music. And I remember putting that on, and we got in the Suburban and we were driving the back way home. And I was listening to this song, and I was just like, help me to believe any of this. I have no idea how to even do when we get home. I don't know how to do the rest of my life like this. And as you know, you keep going forward, and it wasn't just getting through the first year of first. You get to the second year and you're like, oh, it's still the same thing. You mean I have to do that again and again and again? And it's such a journey. But the fact that it was by suicide had other significant impacts. We talked a little bit about guilt. And so it also, unfortunately, is easy for people to look for someone who, who is the problem, whose fault is it that this person went. And so whether that was direct or indirect from people we knew, or even family members and things, I really, there was people who were not happy with me.
That's horrible.
And the boundaries that I drew, and believed that it was my fault. And so,
oh my goodness,
the weight that falls down, and even the way he passed. I had one of my kids. It's just like the light shut off in their eyes, and they ended up struggling intensely with dark things, and went inpatient for being suicidal themselves. One of my kids, I don't think we realize. And it's part of what I long to be able to share with people, having been there. It's something that I still use. It's when we're struggling, we think there's so many lies that we can be believing, like I'm a burden anyway, I'm hurting the people that I'm here for, it'd be better if I wasn't here, all of these things. But like, we don't realize, even like in the spiritual realm, it's like we're on the battlefront with vulnerable people like our kids behind us. And when we partner with the enemy in that way, to for him to take us out, for us to cooperate, it's like we step out of the way. We just like step out of the battle lines, and he can get right through
Wow.
to the people behind us, to our children, to, you know, our spouse that's left. And it's very, very real. It's a very real battle. And just like you would never, as a parent, or if you love someone and saw them in the street and a car is like bearing down, you know, it's like you would be there in a second. Or if they fell down and skinned their knee bloody, you'd be there as a second. And we don't think, like, when you make that choice and when you go out that way, like, those things can happen and you're not going to be there. Like, you're not going to be there for your loved ones who need you. You're not going to be there to protect them. They're not going to be all the things that counter those lies. So yeah, it's just a whole mission, part of my mission, for people to really see the reality of it, because it gets so twisted. And when you're so low for so long, it can be really hard to hold on to hope.
Wow. So at the time that your husband passed away, how old were your kids?
Oh, let's see if I can memorize. I know the youngest was 5 days before her second birthday. So
really little. Yeah.
The other was 3.
Oh my goodness. We're talking little kids. Okay.
1 and 3. And then I believe it was 9 and 12.
Okay. So some really little,
13.
Okay. Really hard. Yeah. And you yourself were young. How old were you when you became widowed?
I was 31 and Andre was 30.
Wow.
He would have been 31 within that month. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you, we know it was a really dark place for a really long time. How did you get out of it? Like, what changed? What shifted?
I wish that there's like a switch.
Right. I know it's not automatic, but what are some, things that helped you?
Yes. It's a battle. I really, I use this language for a reason, because it really is, it's a continual fight. A huge part of it for me was needing to shift where I was, so that I was really in places that were safe and healing. And so that involved the church community thing. I tried for a long time. We had lots of meetings with leadership and with my counselor involved and people. And there was never any repentance, resolution. Which is so critical for widows to be empowered.
Yes.
How are we supposed to do what we have to do and carry what we have to carry, and go from being, yes, biblically in ways underneath a spouse, under a husband's leadership and stuff, to being the head of the home, when you're not given any power and any support and any, that it's just so critical. Like, we can't expect people to carry something where we give no strength to them to do so. And so safe communities, safe places, I needed to make a change of churches. There were relationships that had to shift, where, there's a lot of people don't know what to do, and that's not their fault. I mean, even still, when someone passes away, so I can try to be there for someone. I'm like, I know I don't still have the perfect thing to say, but where there's people who, bring you down, people are like, this was, your fault. What could you have done?
That's so horrible.
Or, isn't it time that you get over this by now? Or even the toxic positivity ideas of like, well, God is positive, like, get up and move on. Like, they're wanting that light switch to turn on, but it's really for themselves. So they say things to make themselves feel better.
Yep.
Instead of meeting you and actually being able to companion you in your grief and walk alongside you and with you. So finding those safe places was a big part
safe
of my
places.
healing.
Yeah.
Safe relationships with people, safe churches. Counseling was
huge
yes for me. I did that every week for for years. I'm biweekly now. It's just, but I
Yeah,
had
I
an
still go.
amazing counselor who is so wise and was really there for me. So all of those things were helpful. I do think, since grief is so messy, again, there's not like a point where you can grasp it. There's like,
true.
There's all of the mess, but I do think that some point, for me, there had to be a turning from this is hopeless, like this will never be good again. I'm trapped here in this pain and everything's lost and I'm bereft of everything. There had to be some kind of where, like, yes, the grief and the pain is still there, but I wanted to get unstuck. I wanted to have some kind of hope and healing. And even though I didn't know what that meant and it was still a struggle and a battle, there did have to come a point where it's like, you're right, even if I can't, land gratitude every single day, I'm going to look for things to be thankful for. My kids and I for years, we would load in the car to go to school, and everyone would go around in the car and we would name 3 things that we were thankful for.
That's good.
And 3 new things, and really trying to like focus on,
I love that.
Okay, what is the beauty? Yeah, and the beauty around us. I would look for things to take pictures of, and it's kind of it's fun to see how that's come to life, even in like the merchandise shop that I have. That some of those pictures that I took, I put in the front of journals now. These like
I love
pictures
it.
of beauty, because at the time everything was so dark. I had to look for it. Like you really have to have an eye for it, and so things like that, being open to the new things and continuing the fight. There's that verse in Ruth, and of course I love the book of Ruth because she is a widow too.
Yeah.
But in Ruth 3:18, it says, "Wait, my daughter, and see what happens."
Oh, so good.
Wait and see what happens. And I got that carved in. Someone made.
I love that.
Burnt it on wood for me, beautifully.
That's beautiful.
And I just years and years, I had it right in front of where I could see from my bed, because it can get lost. But having those reminders, and in Isaiah, 43:19, see, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm going to make streams in the desert. And even though there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days where it was like, is anything new happening?
Right.
Like, I don't see anything new springing up anywhere. To be open to that when and where it was, then I could begin to see things grow and shift, and the journey of faith continued through losing my husband and through widowhood, and it continued into the new seasons, meeting my husband now and blending our family, and so there was never like, there's the answer,
right,
here's the replacement, here's where it all gets better,
right.
But it's like, oh, this deep faith, this deep relationship I have with the Lord, like where he cuddles me in my bed at night, that carries forward into the next season with us.
That's beautiful. That's kind of how I would always picture it. Like when I was crying out, I would imagine that I was like in Jesus's lap. Like when I was just like crying those desperate tears of like, help me, like help me, And so I get what you're saying. I say like cuddling. I get it. Yeah, that's how I felt. So let's kind of move forward a little bit. When did you know you were ready to date? Let's talk about your dating journey a little bit, and kind of how you got to where you are today.
I'm laughing a little bit because I still don't know if I have a clear, that was something I struggled with, like, when am I going to be ready? Like this idea, I don't know, maybe it's the perfectionism or just the works-based, righteousness thing that I was soaked in for so long, but I felt like, oh, there has to, I'm broken now. And so there has to be a point where I'm healed enough to be better and to be good enough, and then this will happen. And I do, I do think there's a lot of things that we need to face honestly and work through with the Lord and heal that are going to help us to be ready for someone. But having it in my mind where I was trying to pin down like whether I was worthy, ready, became really hard to make a decision day to day if that was like going to be a thing or not. And I was completely consumed, with these 4 kids. I have ones with some specific needs and different diagnoses, and everyone was in counseling, and I was just like running like mad. And so it was really survival for a lot of years. So I had those same questions, and really believe it or not, it was a clear word from the Lord. I had thought about getting on a dating site. And I was like, well, for one, just to be honest, there was a lot of like shame about that. I was like, because in my background too, that was kind of or had been talked about in the church community I was in. It was like, no, you meet someone in church who's running where you're running, and then you see their lives, and then and here's all the rules, and then this is how it's gonna look. And so I was like, oh, that's like a bad immature thing or something like that. And so I was praying through this with the Lord, and I remember there being a time I was praying with the Lord about this, and I was like, so if this is something I should do, like I need to I want to hear from you. I want us to be led by you. And he was like right now. And I was like, is this me talking? I was like, what do you mean right now? And I felt him say, like, right now, like you can do it right now. And I was like, like, I'm a person again. Like I got my to-do list. I'm running these things with these kids. I was like, right now, like I did have an afternoon, and I was like, this is kind of, I don't know, bizarre. But I felt that. I felt that very strongly from the Lord. Another time that he spoke clearly. So I set up a profile on eHarmony, and I hated it. I really, I think I was on there for 2 months. My days were so full that I didn't really have a lot of time. What it kind of looked like for 2 months was that definitely not every night. I would sometimes in the evening, as after I got all my kids to bed and I'm completely spent, I would get on this app and I'd look at my messages and there'd be all these, and I basically would copy and paste the same thing that said, hey, thanks for your interest. I don't think we're a great fit. Best of luck to you. Bye. And I'd like, because
you were nice.
But I'd look at them and I'd be like, oh, nope. And it was just that. And so I'd copy and paste that, clear the inbox out until I got to it some other evening. And I was like, this feels like a game. I don't know, like some of these things on the profiles, and how do you figure out? I was like,
it's a whole world, different world.
Really know the Lord.
Right.
What is, it was rough. So I was ready to be done. I think I'd been on there for like 2 or 3 months at that point. And it was like right before I was going to shut it off, I met Mike. And and before I shut it off, at my last ditch attempt to be on here, I took, they have like a radius, how far out of people do you want to see, right? And I kept it real close. I'm like, because I don't have a life except taking care of these kids, and how would any of that work anyway? So I had a very close radius, and I was like, all right, Lord, I'm going to cast this net out there, like, because I don't need a lot of them. I just need the one right one. If this is even right, you're going to have me continue to do. So I think I put it for like the entire continental U.S. And
you're like, okay,
man in Missouri. So I'm here in Colorado. I met Mike from Missouri, and we still joke about this. He's like, you tried to close the door several times, and the Lord just like put his foot in the door and kept it open for me. So I met Mike, and we would, and I was very busy. I mean, I remember being like, okay, on Thursday at this time we could video call. I was like, I don't got time. I got a lot of time. But as I got to know this man and his faith, what stood out to me immediately was he really had a gifting in hearing from the Holy Spirit and in prayer, and really in doing warfare, which was such a grace, because that ended up being exactly, what we needed. I mean, I knew of spiritual warfare and things in general, but I did not have, I even wish, like as I went through things with my late husband, I wish I had seen more of the spiritual battle. It wasn't just flesh and these things that were going on. It was way bigger than that. And so it was such a grace when Mike came into our lives, but that it has been such a journey, because as you can imagine, it wasn't a simple, easy process. And like I mentioned, that I would try to close the door. I knew that I had trauma from what I've been through, right? I knew that I would have struggles in a new relationship based on how things went down the last year of my late husband's life. And but like, those things intellectually, but then when you get in a relationship with someone and you get triggered and the things start to come out, I didn't realize the depth of what that would look like. So I was more than I realized. I was afraid of being abused. I was flighty. I needed to feel safe. I was very aware of my past experience with men and Christian men, related to the faith, of using that as a way of putting you under instead of empowering you. And Mike has just been such a gift, because he has consistently and repeatedly, empowered me, supported my voice. And but it's quite the journey.
Yeah. Tell me about the first time you guys met in person. Like, how long was that from when you met him, and what was it like, and all of that?
I should have thought through the timeline a little bit more. I think we trying to remember. So we started to have calls more often. I made time. I would talk with him when we were driving. I felt like I needed to get to know him and bathe things in prayer. Oh, one of the really important things was that he started counseling with me. So the second week that I met him, I felt very strongly about him from the first time that I video called him, enough to introduce him to my counselor. So from the second week,
that's amazing,
that we knew each other, we were doing counseling weekly. So weekly counseling via Zoom. So we were doing that every week together, talking to each other frequently. Then, of course, at a time where I felt right about it, that it felt more safe, he met my kids over video call. That was, I don't know how many, few months in. I wanted to be sure of how I was feeling before I introduced them into the mix, because I didn't want to throw them and have them have more abandonment things or things to process.
Right.
And then I met him in person. He flew out for the first time. Oh gosh, it was probably I think maybe 5 months.
Oh, wow. So you talked a while.
4 or 5 months. He flew out here, and I picked him up from the airport, and he came and met my parents and the kids in person. But the kids by this point had we would put him on the phone when we were in the car. We'd do gratitude and thankfulness all together.
I love
he was
that.
praying over them at night. Again, like
what an amazing man. Wow.
Yeah, it was such a gift, because we had a lot of issues at night. And with nightmares, and my littlest one had an attachment disorder and would wake up over and over and over and over and over. I mean, in the first almost 2 years, it was 12 to 20 times a night. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But she still continued to have struggles years and years out. So praying over them and them seeing him and knowing him, but him being here in person was a shock. So he would come, and he stayed with, we had 2 different friends from our small group, because he was calling in on some small group meetings.
Oh, wow.
And so he stayed with those families, but he would be here with me. Like he would come out for a week to 2 weeks. Later on, it moved into 2 weeks out of a month.
Wow.
So he made the sacrifice to drive 10.5 hours. He would drive out for a week, stay with one or both of those families, but he'd come over when I was getting the kids ready in the morning. He'd jump in, help with that, making breakfast, driving kids, taking care of, the littlest while the others were in school, and doing counseling and dinner and the bedtime routine and praying with them. And then we would sit downstairs with like a cup of tea, and it'd be like 9 and we'd both be wiped. It was like a whole new world for him. We'd be like, hey,
yeah.
so it's nice to see you. Like,
right.
This is the only time we actually have, together, is for a short time before he went back over to my friends. So it was, he invested, he gave so much to be here. And my kids got to know him, and how he was there and steady in that way. But, a really important part of this story, which is something that only the Lord can do these things. So he also has a daughter. So now we have 5.
Mm-hmm.
But when this started, that was a whole nother thing. Like, I remember talking with my counselor for the first time about him, and she's like, okay, so he's in Missouri and he has a daughter there.
Mm-hmm.
And how is this going to work?
Right.
Like, we'll just have to pray, for praying. I was like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know all the answers, but it would seem like, well, that's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, that's just not going to work, because as we went along, his, I think Kaylee was 15 when we met. And so Mike had never been married. He came to know the Lord later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Kaylee's mom were together until she was 2. So they'd been separated, well, co-parenting, but separated for 13 years. But she had a biological mom there and a life there. And it was like, so we did overlap some. I would bring all of my kids out to Missouri. We did that several times for like Thanksgiving, Christmas, some things like that. But overall, we got a lot more of him here than what I could do there. So I would talk with Kaylee on video calls and things. And, she was always polite. But of course, the 2 oldest girls were struggling the most with the whole thing of like, who are you to me? And who are you to me? And what does this all mean? And, it's really important to acknowledge that loss is a part of blending families.
Yes, it is.
And we can't just like paint joy over it. Like, oh, look, even though it's true. Yes, love expands, love grows. There's enough for everyone. Those things are true. But there are real losses that have to be acknowledged and have to be walked through for everyone in the family. And so, when it came time and we had delayed the wedding, so thinking it was a year and a half later
from when you
married.
Started dating that you were getting married?
I think so. I should have really
It's okay.
You know how like the widowhood, I still am in the fog. Okay?
Yeah.
How did all this happen, and what happened and when? And so we had the wedding, but Kaylee, before that, Mike was doing counseling also with Kaylee, which was really important, and trying to process through these things with her and honor her heart in all of it. But she, she had said before the wedding, I'm not going with you. He'd asked her to move out with him. And she was like, I'm not going to do that. And so Mike was really struggling. Oh, I like that. A really important part. So before Mike and I ever met in person, he, like I mentioned, has times, not all the time, has these times where the Lord really, really clearly, Holy Spirit speaks to him. Yeah. Like the vision that I had. Yeah. To have like a vision and have something really clear that the Lord gives you. He had went out, spent a couple of hours with the Lord in the wilderness, and there's this whole story to it. But he came back from that, and he was like, the Lord, he was asking about us. Because, as the stakes get higher and all of this, like you're going to meet each other's kids and this, and I need to know, like, Lord, what do you have here? Yeah. And he wanted to know from the Lord. And the Lord told him clearly, very, very, very clearly, that he and I were meant to be together and to be a picture of the Lord. The 2 of us were a picture of him. And Mike has never wavered from that point.
It's amazing.
I was flighty. I was like, is this going to work? Is this
right?
you know,
I've been
but
there.
he was like, the Lord has showed me, and I'm here for you. And he was just steady. And, so he knew. So when this happened and Kaylee wasn't going to be coming with him, he was truly, I mean, wrought up. It was, her situation there in Missouri wasn't the most stable. It was not best for her to stay behind there. And he had been what she needed in a lot of ways. And so he had family, you know, that came against him as well. You know, it was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And he's like, following the Lord. And they're like, well, what is, you know, like, how is this supposed to work? And how is this supposed to happen? And he was like, I'm trusting the Lord. Like, I don't have all the answers, but I know I'm supposed to go where he shows me to go. And so we get married in March, and Mike is praying every single night. Like, this is very distressing to him every day for Kaylee to be in a different state. And he's praying every night, like, Lord, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm asking that you could put us under the same roof. And like 2 months after we got married, different dominoes fell down over there, like major things for her mom, and just like that fast. Everybody knew she was coming here, and there was no other way. And he was like, I never had to force my hand. Like, I never had to come against anyone or like make it into a war. And he went out there with his truck and picked her and her things up, and she's been here ever since.
Wow.
It was such a grace. It was such a grace that like nobody could have known, like, what, you can't do that. Like, what about, and he's like, I don't know how the Lord's going to work it out. But, and then like for everybody to see like how the Lord just like worked this thing out. It was just, I don't know, it was faith.
That's
building
amazing.
and growing for everybody, not just for me and Mike, but for our families. And so, you know, it was definitely a process. She wasn't thrilled about it when it happened. And then, but by the end of summer, even like she believed that she was supposed to be here for the school year. The two oldest girls who had, you know, when I remember having Thanksgiving in Missouri and them sitting at like different rooms of the house and not talking, were like having a sleepover together and movie night on the trampoline. And now they're like getting into trouble together. And so it's, I mean, the movement of it, and for her mom to really struggle and threaten to come get her, to like, nope, I see like she should really finish high school out there. And for Kaylee to say that as well. I mean, there's always ups and downs, but to see some of these shifts, it's like,
it's amazing.
Oh, the Lord could have done some of these things.
That's absolutely amazing. So I want to ask you a little bit about when you started dating, because this is a question I get a lot. Did you have grief when you started dating?
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely. Yes. That has been, you know, honestly, a challenging thing, even for Mike and I. So I would say that when I went into it, as a widow and as someone who, you know, learned a lot about what's helpful in grief and how people can be there for people who are grieving, well, I really came into it thinking like, okay, I've been through all of this stuff. Like, so you better like come alongside me well. And what I ended up learning was like, he's also his own person.
Yeah.
And there's going to be things that are hard for him to be able to walk alongside me. And is there a way that I also care for his heart and where this is hard for him, and all of the adjustments and all of the transitions and what he's processing through, stepping into a relationship. You know, he told me, he's like, I waited 41 years for you. Like I've never had this with anybody. You're the one that I love. You're the one that I want. And then I'm here like, I love you. And I always love Andre.
Yeah.
And like, how does this fit together? So it honestly, hopefully this gives people hope that we're not ones that we're just like maybe some of the other stories that I've heard, that's like, oh yeah, it's amazing. he's everything that I need him to be in my grief, and everything's great and all this. And we've really had to I realize it took counseling and work for me to see that I had my own blinders on, that I thought that this was just my story. It's just my story to steward and just my grief to walk. And it's I've been through all this pain and I have this loss. And you come in where I need you to, how I need you to, because I'm the one that's gone through it. And it's he's his own person with his own grief and his own triggers. And he's his own person with his own struggles about what that means to him and how he feels about that. I mean, we had to work through things even regarding my last name and whether that was going to change or not.
Right.
To be honest. And people, I think, can so easily be well, if he's not going to be this way, then throw him out the window. And I do, everybody has things that they will and won't do and convictions, and that's all important. But I guess what I'm saying is I've really had to learn that even as a griever, that how do I also companion and walk alongside someone who is having their own pain and is joining me in this journey, and what that is for both of us. How do we both care for the other's heart in the midst of what we both have been through and in what we're creating here together. So I feel I didn't realize there was a lot of pride and entitlement that I had that had to be broken down to be just as willing to give him and be what he needs as much as I was expecting and hoping and asking from him.
So good. No, that really is helpful to me because, Joel is divorced and is a broken family. And, I guess I haven't, I will acknowledge sometimes, talk about his grief, but the way that you're saying it is really kind of convicting me that I need to be more it's not well, I'm the one who went through a death, but it's no, he went through a death of a family and all his stuff. And that I need to be more sensitive to his grief as well. Cause it is usually centered around, well, I'm the one who's widowed. So that I'm getting convicted of what you're talking about, that I need to be more sensitive to his grief, even though it's not the death of a person, so that's a really great point.
Well, in that environment, we're still work in process over here, but that kind of environment offers a safe place for everyone, including the children, right? To blend, because everybody is processing their own losses. And so these kids lost a parent, lost their uncle daddy, and lost their daddy by death. And this child has also lost a parent in a sense.
Yeah.
And so it can be easy to pit those things against well, mine is that. But it's oh, can we acknowledge we both kind of get what it feels like to be alone and to not have the person that you need, and to have a space where I like the way Ron Deal says that. I love
he's
Ron
great
Deal's resources.
Yes.
When it comes to blending families and things, but that it's more of a crockpot than a blending.
Yes, we heard that. Yeah.
But it's not so
blending. Yeah. No.
It's everybody is saying their own unique ingredient, and the heat is up and over a long time. Everyone can retain what they are and also create something together that's blended and unique. And it's an ongoing process to try to be that for one another. I mean, that's why I said earlier, the journey of faith continues, because we were kind of laughing and kind of not about it in one of our counseling sessions back a while ago. And our counselor was like, man, isn't it rough how that worked out? A lot of people, you guys come together because you want love and you want your needs to be met, and you have an idea of these good things. And then in some of the aftermath of what it can be in blending families, nobody's getting any of that. And so that makes it really hard. And she's like, you know what? But you guys, both of you, continue to show up and continue to be willing to be there for the other and to grow and to change. And she's like, it's a really special thing that you have someone who's invested in your best interest, and to have one another to keep journeying with. But yeah, it's had its it's had its challenges, and we still navigate things, and it's been a gift in a lot of ways. I didn't realize how much how much growth I had to do in marriage, because another thing, maybe my pride, I thought like, well, I've done this before. Like I've done this, and he hadn't, right? He hadn't been married. And I'm like, well, I was married for 11 and a half years.
I know.
And you haven't been married at all. So I clearly know some things about this more than you do. And really, like, the Lord was so gracious to humble me when I realized, like, no, I really am starting all over with this person. Even though I know intellectually, Mike is different than Andre. But then when you're going through the things, like a way that I don't know, it could be anything. This isn't one for us, but I've heard like one that you come up and give him a massage on his shoulders, or have something that you do in jest during conflict, and then it like doesn't work. And you're like, oh, well, that always worked.
Exactly.
This person, but this is a different person.
Yeah. It's totally different. It's a whole different marriage.
Starting all over. I'm like, no, I got to learn all of this over with you.
Exactly. Yeah. So how long have you guys been married now?
It is like in between 1.5 years and 2.
Okay.
Years.
So was it March of 23?
March of 23, yes.
That's when I got married. That's how I know. March 18th, 2023.
Oh, we were just earlier in the month. So
yeah.
close.
I know, when you're like 1.5 years to 2, I'm like, that's the same as me. That's exciting. So yeah, we're kind of on the same timeline of the whole blending the family and getting used to each other. And I mean, very similar stories as far as like long distance, and Joel had to move here, and just a lot of things. And it's an adventure, that's for sure. Some really good days and some hard things. And you do both carry grief, even if the other person's not widowed. They've got their own grief. And so that's something that you can respect and work with. And how is he about, I mean, I'm guessing from like his character already, but just the audience can hear, how is he about like you talking about your late husband and having pictures and all of that? How is he with all that?
Yeah. I would say it depends on what context. So he's been, and I think it's really healthy. It is really healthy for us to have honest conversations about things. Like, he told me some of the pictures that I'd had that he'd seen that were like much more intimate photos with me and Andre, being close and kissing and different things. He's like, those hurt. That hurts my heart to see you
with someone else.
Wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Joel's explained that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in my mind, I was like, what do you mean? Like, he's not here. Like,
right.
He's dead. And so why does it matter? And again, this is, you could see like where I'm thinking it's got to be this way, but hearing is hard about it. So he's been able to share things like that. Other things, are okay. And we talk about things. We talk about Andre with the kids. He'll ask them about how they're feeling, and that's awesome. And he wants to be there for me more and more in my own grief journey and processing things. But yeah, he's been clear where there are areas that he struggles with that and where he has limits, and other times he's been so in the areas where he doesn't have trigger points and things, he can wrap me up. And I've had some of the most healing experiences with him, like recognizing how that repeated theme in my life of feeling alone in my pain, and hearing some of the memories and the things that, and just being able to hear it and to be there alongside me and hold me and scoop me up, and been very healing. So yeah, it's both, depending on what on what you're talking about.
Exactly.
There's some things I've realized that I, just like with anything else, you're going to have particular places and people that make the most sense to process that with. I'm going to talk about things with my group of widow gals that I'm close with different.
Yes.
Than I will with him.
Exactly.
Or,
yeah.
And that's okay. And he wants me to have people to go to and support. And he's just been figuring out where he falls in all of that. And it continues to grow and change. And he's named that he wants that. So I'm thankful. And I hope that I also continue to grow and change, and like we said, recognizing and supporting him as well, and even all that he lost in moving and relationships and all the adjustments. And there's two people here.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it, definitely. I remember we got engaged in Texas, and I was getting on the plane to go home, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, if I get married again, that means I could be widowed again. Do I even want to do this? Like the first thought, like, I don't ever want it, but I'm like, no, it's better. Just like it's better to have loved and lost, it's better to have loved and lost a second time than to not have loved at all. I just had to be like, okay, I'm releasing that. But it was like a real fear that like took over once I realized I was getting married again. But it's worth it. The point is, it's worth it, to have.
It is, but that's a real, I wonder if we all don't have them. Well, I certainly did too. And I talk with Mike about those things. I'm like, this is something that I'm struggling with, or I've had these thoughts because, you've had those experiences before of laying your head on someone's chest and hearing their heartbeat and them not being there anymore. And then you have this other special person you love, and you're like, wait a second.
Right.
I can either go to places of fear with that, but I feel like the Lord has really helped, even well before Mike, curbed that, just like the thankfulness in the car. One of the themes that the Lord really walked me through was acceptance with joy. And it was really rough. But acceptance with joy and the beauty of that. So I, even long before Mike, really what the Lord was pressing into me is like, it's not always going to be the way it is right now. And a lot of that can speak to the dark and the hard and the hopeless, like how it is right now. Yes, it's been however many hundreds of days. It will not always be the way it is right now.
That's good.
So like we can hold on to hope, and also the good things that you have right now. You're not always going to have them. It's not always going to be the way it is right now. So just soak in every day.
Right, that's good.
Soak them up and soak them in. And so I was in a habit of like, okay, what are these beautiful things that I can take hold of and really just richly enjoy, because everything is going to come to its end. And that can make us fear, or that can make us just like really enjoy and have eyes to see the richness in right now. And so I try in that same pattern with what he's walking me to when my mind starts to wander into those deep, low, dark places, to curb it into, I am going to soak this moment in. Like, I'm going to enjoy him playing with these kids, and they're climbing on him, and their laughter, and him holding me, and these different moments, because whichever, it won't always be the way it is right now.
Oh, that's beautiful. So what advice do you have to a new widow?
Oh man, someone said to me, they were someone who I could really see, like the grief that they were an older person that got the weight of this after Andre died. And when I first saw them, he said, Rachel, you are going to see the Lord's faithfulness in such an extravagant way. And I could receive that from him at that time. I'm so thankful, because he was able to grieve with me. So I would say, I mean, that was like one of the most profound things, is like, you are going to see the Lord's faithfulness to carry you through the unbelievable, to bear you through what feels unbearable, to comfort you in such a way that, as it says, the comfort you've received, you're going to use.
Yes.
You're going to be able to give and comfort other people. So there is an innate like hope and purpose through that pain, like you said, through what we're going through. That was just profound to me, like the Lord's faithfulness, the Lord's consistency. And I have come to know him more deeply than I ever have before. And I wouldn't, even though I hate what I've been through, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I would not want to go back to who I was before.
Right.
Because of how I know the Lord now. And so I hate the saying, like, something being worth it. Nothing was, it was great or worth it that Andre was dead. But the transformation in me, my suffering, the transformation was worth my suffering. And so I hope that that's an encouragement to someone on like the practical end. My heart just goes out to new widows, because in my circumstance, Andre was the financial and the tech arms of our marriage, the house maintenance arm. We have 4 kids, all of the to-dos, like what would be so helpful to organize these things that you have to do, the immediate things for their passing and the things you have to learn, taking over their roles.
Yeah, it's a
and
lot.
How do you enlist help
Yes.
into those things, and being gentle with yourself. Yeah, those are such critical things when you're already in a fog of grief. And so that was also why one of the first resources that I created through Hope Speaker was a newly widowed checklist.
Awesome.
Because that was a nightmare for me. When Andre died, his identity immediately got stolen.
Oh,
I
no.
didn't know. I was in the fog of all these other things. These envelopes were stacking up. It was like this nightmare thing. When I opened them, someone had, the opened credit card stolen money, tried to get a loan. I spent, I was at this point getting up so many times a night with my youngest. I was sleep deprived. I was completely in shock and devastation. I was wearing his shirts. I had our rings around my neck.
I did
and
all
I'm
that.
sitting at the police station for hours and hours and hours about the identity theft.
That's
and
awful.
all of that, and trying to figure out the passwords and what did I need. And then I made the mistake of telling someone that and I didn't know. I'm trying to do the right things and go through the steps, and the credit card, one of the credit cards, learned that he died and shut it down on me. And even as a spouse with my name on the thing, it got closed off to me.
Oh,
and
wow.
So those things were so not what I needed at that time. And so that resource, that newly widowed checklist, does talk about, it's like a consolidated and organized checklist for what to do, either to prevent or to deal with their identity theft, to do things in the right order so you don't have things that cause you more grief, and how to enlist the help of others, and really being gentle with yourself and thinking about, what do you do with their belongings, and what do you need, and making the decisions, and who feels safe to you to delegate those things to. So, that's the newly widowed checklist. So I would definitely put that out there. It's at newlywidowedchecklist.com.
Awesome. We'll also link it in the show notes so they can just click on it right below. That's awesome. So we have to wrap it up here in a minute, but what, now you have Hope Speaker, you have these resources, and you are letting God completely use you, which is awesome. What else do you do? I think you said you write a blog. Can you tell us what else you do and where else they can find you if they want to continue following your journey?
Yeah, well, hopespeaker.com is
we'll
website.
Link that.
And
okay.
Yes, I have the blog. So I do weekly blog writing, and hopefully in the future writing of books as well. So I enjoy that. I also do speaking. I do speaking at events, and sometimes that's with music. So I can do speaking and singing, or just speaking. That was a grace in my journey. When I found a safe church to go to, I was able to get right back into worship leading.
So
and
great.
Music is just such a powerful, and profound way of connecting with our hearts and with the Lord. And so, I do writing, speaking, singing, and then my oldest girl and I have created what is called the Hope Shop. And so when I was really, really low, and all of your thoughts are dark, and you're being bombarded with these things, I needed tangible reminders of hope right in front of me. Things with statements like, your story isn't over yet. I had a little card that I'd scribbled on that is still. in my bathroom, like right there by the faucets. So we hand design and create in our family these reminders of hope, from t-shirts and hoodies and hats to things like mugs and journals and tote bags that have these reminders of hope. And so they're birthed, right from the ashes in our story of our family. And she helps me with that. So that's at, you can find it through the website, but it's hopespeaker.shop. And so we create those tangible reminders of hope for other people.
Okay, awesome. We will link all of those for sure. I love that you're letting God do something beautiful. I love that you're doing that Hope Shop with your daughter. That's beautiful. And, continuing to let God use you. Your story has been amazing. And I'm excited to follow your journey and see where God takes you with your speaking and your writing and all the things that you're doing. Because it's absolutely incredible. That's one of my favorite things, is just watching God use people and see his faithfulness, like you talked about. Yeah,
looking at his faithfulness,
because I can see it all around. Like, one of my favorite things is, I call them baby widows, like brand new widows, is watching these baby widows. Like, I can think of a group of them right now who they all came to me around the same time. Their husbands had just died. I took them through a class called Grief Recovery. And then they've come to the retreat, and now they are stepping up. And just this past weekend, they had led their own groups in their own areas. And it's just the most beautiful thing to see when, God is faithful. And then God gives people healing, and then they go out and they're able to be an instrument for God's healing for other people. And then it just keeps going. And so,
because he empowers us. And that was another profound, that was one of the other visions I had, where he stood me up, he pulled me up off the ground and gave me my voice when I was really doubting, and in the midst of all this stuff of even, do I talk about what happened at all, about things in the church and with my late husband, because I was so silent about all of it. Nobody even knew what had happened.
Wow.
And he brings us up and gives us our voices. And when God empowers and heals, the most beautiful, incredible things can start to happen and can spread.
Yes. Well, I'd love to close this in prayer. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. God, I just thank you so much for Rachel. Thank you for her reaching out and finding this podcast, and for having a voice, and that you giving her a voice, God. And I just pray blessings over Hope Speaker, Hope Shop, all the things that she has going on, that you continue to give her the people to minister to. Just the right person will hear this and all the things that she's doing. God, I pray for that listener that might be suicidal, God, that you will give them hope and peace, and maybe even a way to connect with Rachel so she can help them through this. And I just pray for every listener right now, that you cover them with the peace that passes all understanding, and help them have joy today. And I also just pray over Rachel's family, just the blending of families, that continues to go well, and they continue to seek you in all of that, and just favor over their family. And we just thank you so much for this day and all you've done. Amen.
Amen.
Well, if you like this podcast, give it a little bing, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. If you have a moment to review it, that helps get the word out. Also wanted to announce that we have a brand new Facebook page. So as most of you know, our Widow Too Soon page is blowing up. Like, we went from a month ago, we had like 900, and now we're at 4,200. And it's great, but now it's becoming more of a ministry. They don't even know it's about a podcast. So I'm starting another group that you can only find if you're a podcast listener. It'll be linked in the show notes. We'd love for you to join that, to be able to discuss the podcast and talk about and connect with other people who are listening, as well as I'll still have the link to the other one, but just a lot of people wanting more of a small, safe community. So I'm starting a new one, and you guys are welcome to be part of that. If you'd like to be a guest, there is a link to apply to be a guest. So thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time. And thanks again, Rachel. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
All right.
Michelle.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Widowed Too Soon with Michelle Bader-Ebersol. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, rate and review. And we'd also love for you to join our Widowed Too Soon community on Facebook. See you next time.